Well, no matter how you define it, a recession is here, even though the Democrats are trying to redefine the word, a word that's been in place and in play for a long time. It's not going to work. Another historic 0.75 percentage point rate hike from the Fed today, looking to rein in inflation. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, in a news conference announcing the rate hike, said the U.S. is not in a recession. We're not? He said, quote, "I do not think the U.S. is currently in a recession, and the reason is there are too many areas of the economy that are performing too well." But despite what Powell says, it does look like we're already in a recession. Powell's just regurgitating the company line that comes from Brian Deese and Joe Biden. And, well, the networks would catch on soon that they're defying the authority of announcing a recession as 2/4 of negative GDP. The U.S. government is the most indebted organization in the history of human life. China looking to drop the dollar as the world's reserve currency, which would absolutely destroy our economy because of all the debt we already hold. So is there any hope to stop this from happening? Here to discuss it is the president of Walser Wealth Management, Rebecca Walser. Rebecca, good to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Greatly appreciated. So, I mean, if you're out there pleading, stomping, holding your breath and saying a recession is not 2 consecutive quarters, if you're trying to redefine recession, you're losing the argument. Right or wrong?
100% right. And let me just tell you how refreshing it is to come on your show and to have you acknowledge from the jump that this is dystopian, that we're going to try to change the definition the very week that we're going to get the data released that will show that we are actually in a recession already. We already have the data from the Fed Atlanta, and we already know that we're probably looking at negative 2.1% negative decline of GDP in the second quarter. That gives us 2 consecutive quarters, negative 1.6 as revised for Q1, and 2.1 potentially somewhere in that range for Q2. It'll be announced tomorrow. Could be worse. The fact that there's so much tap dancing, Steve, indicates to me that they're really afraid of this number coming out, whatever it is.
Well, they should be afraid of the number, because right now they're trying to tell us how much money they've saved us on gasoline, because gas is down 69 cents in 45 days or something. Let me tell you this: where I live, gas was $2.25 on the 21st of January, 2021. It's double that today. It is down about 70 cents, but it's double what it was a year and a half ago.
Right.
People can figure this out, Rebecca. This is absurd.
Yeah. Absolutely right. And, you know, what you started talking about with China and de-dollarizing on reserves, this is happening. And now at this point, I'm pretty sure that it's unstoppable. This is really a plan that's been happening for the last 20 years of the BRICS nations. So that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they have been working for 20 years to de-dollarize, because really the dollar, and specifically the petrodollar, the agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia that was entered into in 1974, where Saudi Arabia and the OPEC producing nations, along with Russia, agreed only to sell oil in U.S. dollars, is what has given our fiat currency an actual quasi-asset backing. In other words, if you wanted to buy oil in the world, you had to have U.S. dollars to do it. That made our dollar and it as a reserve a stable and valued currency. With the Russia invasion of Ukraine, Russia being pushed out of the SWIFT system, this is the only excuse they needed to move forward with their multipolarity different reserve system. That's about 40% of the population of the world that we're talking about. This will destroy the dollar as the reserve, and this is going to affect Americans more than any other country, because we have enjoyed the reserve status since the 40s, but really since the 70s in this way.
When the British pound was taken off as the world's reserve currency about 110, 115 years ago, the United Kingdom entered a long, dark phase because they had been replaced by the American dollar, by the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. It changes everything, and they had a long, dark 10-year period in that country. They've come back, of course, but it's not like it happens overnight. You couple that with $30 trillion in debt. You couple that with inflation, that if it were done the way it was in 1980, we would be at 18.5% inflation, because that's more like the actual number. And the truth of the matter is, people know that. People know that their buying power has evaporated. They know that when they fill their car with gas, that might be all they have. There might not be any room for groceries for the next few days. They might not make the rent payment. Rebecca, a recession by any other name, apparently it's still the same.
100%, Steve. You're preaching to the choir, and thank God we actually have this information getting out to the American public, because so many of Americans' media are not doing their job. They're being derelict and really letting people know what's going on globally. You know, Steve, we could really go into the depths of what's going on, but we do know that if you look at all of the resignations, Israel's government is dissolving and their prime minister stepped down. You have the UK prime minister stepping down. You have the Dutch farmers revolting because of these nitrogen and fertilizer constraints. You have this now happening in Canada where they're saying you have to reduce your fertilizer use by 30%. You know, the margins in farming is so low that you just can't lop off 30% of your production and still make it. So we have farmers that have decided not to plant this year. We have we have ranchers that can't afford to feed their livestock. So they're going ahead and selling their livestock now because they don't have enough water or feed. This is going to affect everything.
This is intentional, Rebecca.
Change.
You can't sit here and watch this series of events and say, well, gosh, it's just a lot of unfortunate things that lined up at the same time. Wrong. When I see Justin Trudeau in Canada saying they have to cut the use of fertilizer by 40%, well, then what he's saying is you're going to cut your output of your food crops by 40%. Really? You've got Ukraine and Russia already bottling up a good supply of the world's wheat crop. Then you have Canada that's going to bottle up peas, oats, barley, wheat, all of it, because they're trying to save the planet from fertilizer now. Nitrogen's now our enemy. Stop it. We need to take control of what's happening out here because this is off the rails. Your thoughts?
Yes. You're dead on. I'm so refreshed that you actually have all of this data that you're spewing for these people to hear the truth, because nobody else is telling the American public that there is a global movement. You know, we have the IMF reported this year we have over $300 trillion of global debt. So when you have that kind of debt bubble in this kind of environment where they're collapsing the food supply, the supply chain, and all of the other things that they are doing intentionally, as you mentioned, this is what the Great Reset is. It is the collapse of the current fiat currency system globally into a new system. They want to move us to central bank digital currencies, and ultimately they want to move us to one world government. But they are collapsing the economy so that we have no choices left but to be beholden to some kind of totalitarian government system.
If you can control energy, you control what power people get, whether they can heat and cool their homes. I learned at a very young age from my brother Shane, hungry people are angry people. Don't give Shane breakfast, the world is unfortunate. We'll have a whole world full of Shanes that are very angry. You think the people with pitchforks are upset now? Wait till you cut off the food supply, and then you destabilize governments, regions. Democracy gets destabilized in a real and genuine and lasting way. That's why it is so critically important, Rebecca, that we get control, our hand back on the wheel November the 8th. Anything short of that is unacceptable to me, because we have people in power now. I won't call them leaders, but people in power now that are doing these things, it would appear intentionally, because nobody could be this stupid. I'll give you the last word.
Well, I will agree that there is no possibility that this is coincidental. All of the things line up to a very directed and pointed direction for the world in a very specific way, and all it leads to is loss of freedom, loss of the ability to feed your family. And I 100% agree with you. When people cannot feed their families, watch out.
Exactly right. And watch the meltdown in the cities. They want to move us to the cities. Well, good luck with that, Rebecca. Good conversation. Really a pleasure having you here. Thank you.
Thank you.